Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Martial Universe Season 6 based on novel. So let's start. Lin Dong's group directly rushed into the desolated forest that was overflowing with a fearsome aura. Under the cover of the enormous lush trees, it seemed like the world in front of them had been covered by layers of faint red blood. There were countless number of geniuses from various empires have been buried within the forest. Clearly, after today, the ground here would turn even more dark red. When Lin Dong's group landed in the forest, they were already able to sense the intense battles that had suddenly erupted within this region. Everyone who had entered this place all showed signs of turning into crazy devils. They had given up on too much in order to reach this place. Hence, no one wanted their final step to be blocked. Even if they were unable to step into the Nirvana Golden ranking, they must still perform to the best of their abilities. This was because this was their final opportunity. What should we do? Sukue's eyes looked around him. The surrounding atmosphere caused his expression to turn solemn. Immediately, he did not dare to make any decisions and chose to turn to look at Lin Dong instead. Let's head directly to the 100 Empire Mountain. Those who can reach that place are the true elites and their Nirvana seals are the best. Lin Dong softly said. Instead of bitterly snatching other people's Nirvana seals in this outer area, it was better to head directly to the foot of the 100 Empire Mountain and wait for others to do the work. Although those who could reach there were all extraordinary individuals, it would save them a great deal of effort. Swoosh! Lin Dong's voice had just sounded when he suddenly frowned and lifted his head. He could sense that there was quite a number of rushing wind sounds hurrying towards his direction. Have we been targeted so soon? Mo Ling and the rest also appeared to have detected something. The looks on their faces changed before they quickly circulated the Yuan power within their bodies. The sound of wind splitting swiftly arrived. Moments later, numerous figures came rushing over from both sides of the forest. Finally, they appeared on the empty ground of Lin Dong's group. A surprised expression involuntarily appeared on Lin Dong's face when these people appeared. This was because those in front of him were individuals that he was acquainted with. Ha ha, brother Lin Dong. It has been half a year since we have met, it looks like you are doing well. A white-clothed handsome man, who was standing amongst the group to the left, cupped his hands together and laughed in a loud clear voice. It turns out that he was actually the one who had also obtained one of the 4 great mysterious sex inheritance back then, Liu Bai. There were quite a number of experts clustered around Liu Bai. That glaring red-dressed enchanting lady with a slim and lovely body beside him was also someone that Lin Dong was acquainted with, Mu Hongling. Beside Mu Hongling stood a strong-looking man. This man had a square face and his rough eyebrows contained some prestige. It was likely that he was no ordinary individual. There were fewer people towards the right side. However, all of them possessed powerful auras. The one leading them was the black-clothed Yang Sen. All the inheritors of the 4 great mysterious sects had actually gathered at this place. While Lin Dong was observing Liu Bai's group, the other party had clearly placed their eyes onto the former's body. His eyes contained a deep sigh. When they had first seen Lin Dong back then, the latter was not even worthy enough for them to view him seriously. However, now, even their prideful self had no choice but to admit that Lin Dong's lineup had gradually surpassed them. At the very least, they could not force the Great Net Empire to pay such a heavy price when faced with the latter. These people are really strong. That square-faced man beside Mu Hongling slowly spoke with a grave expression in his eyes. Mu Hongling nodded gently. Her teeth bit her red lips as her beautiful eyes stared at Lin Dong with a complicated expression. When they had first met, Lin Dong had not even reached the half-step to Nirvana stage. Yet, he had currently become the dark horse, who was most likely to enter the Nirvana Golden ranking. You would not come looking for me if there is no reason to do so. Since everyone has come looking for me, I don't think it's because you are after the Nirvana seals in our hands, right? Lin Dong smiled slightly. He remained calm despite the arrival of these two large factions. With his strength, Lin Dong would not be afraid even when faced with those so-called 10 great super empires. Brother Lin Dong really knows how to joke. Currently, there is hardly anyone in the 100 Empire Forest who dares to target you. Liu Bai smiled. Promptly, he paused before he said, "The reason that we have come here is because we wish to cooperate with Brother Lin Dong." Cooperate? Lin Dong was startled. Since Brother Lin Dong has already exchanged blows with the Great Net Empire, I think that you should aware of the Ground Evil Alliance and the inheritors of the 4 great demon sects, right? Liu Bai asked. Yes. One of the inheritors of the 4 great demon sect, the Great Net Empire, has already been finished off by your group. However, there are still 3 powerful empires waiting for us. Moreover, amongst them, the inheritance of the Dao Tai sect was obtained by one of the 10 great super empires, the Sky Devil Empire, and their strength is extraordinary. Based on the information that we have obtained, these 3 great empires have already set up a trap and are waiting for us. The place that we must pass by in order to reach the 100 Empire Mountain has already been sealed by them. Liu Bai laughed bitterly when he spoke until this point. He said, "We have already fought with the Blood Seal Empire and the Bone Jade Empire. We can be considered as evenly matched. However, the Sky Devil Empire is too powerful. If they were to join forces, it would be impossible for us to break through." Lin Dong's eyebrows also knitted gently when he saw the bitter smile on Liu Bai's face. 3 great empires joining forces, with one of them being a vicious 10 great super empire. With this kind of lineup, it would likely be extremely difficult for them to charge through alone. The Ground Evil Alliance and the Tiangang Alliance are factions that totally oppose each other. In order to obtain the inheritance, they would definitely not let us off easily. It is likely that none of us will be able to run from this battle. Yang Sen spoke in a soft and deep voice. How powerful is the Sky Devil Empire? Lin Dong asked. Very powerful. The Sky Devil Empire is said to have 3 devils. The eldest is called Songjin, the second is called Song Q, and the third is Song Ba. All of them are experts, who had stepped into the 5 Yuan Nirvana stage. Moreover, there are also some underlings with extraordinary strength beneath them. Liu Bai curled his lips. His voice contained a dense fear. They were also a super empire, but the strength of the Sky Devil Empire was far surpassed them. 3-5 Yuan Nirvana stage Her. Mo Ling and the others behind Lin Dong had a drastic change in their expressions upon hearing these words. The strength of this 10 great super empires was actually this terrifying. They are indeed extremely troublesome to deal with. A solemnness surged up Lin Dong's eyes. This was likely the empire with the grandest lineup that he had encountered since entering this ancient battlefield. 3-5 Yuan Nirvana stage. It was likely sufficient to eliminate Liu Bai's group. No wonder they did not dare to enter into the deep region, and had instead chose to come looking for him. Are you asking us to deal with the Sky Devil Empire? Little Martin asked with a half smile. I know that this is making things difficult for you, but you are the only ones who are currently able to deal with them. Liu Bai laughed bitterly while feeling a little embarrassed. The ones whom Lin Dong's group had to deal with in this alliance was going to be the most troublesome opponent. All of us are considered to be on the same boat. Lin Dong, if we are finished off by the Sky Devil Empire, you will also be besieged from all sides. Therefore, none of us has a choice. Yang Sen spoke in a deep voice. Currently, everyone knows that the Sky Devil Empire has already made an arrangement in the deep regions of the 100 Empire Forest and are waiting for us. Even those experts from the super sects on the 100 Empire Mountain could be staring at that place. Unless we withdraw from this 100 Empire war now, otherwise, we must engage in this fight. Lin Dong knitted his brows tightly, but he did not speak. If they could be victorious in this battle, it was likely that they could directly ascend the 100 Empire Mountain. However, if they were to fail, 1 year of bitter training would come to naught. Liu Bai and Yang Sen ceased saying anything as they looked at Lin Dong descending into silence. However, their heartbeats had unknowingly increased. Lin Dong was considered as their final potential savior. With their current strength, it was impossible for them to contend against the Sky Devil Empire. The only one who could achieve this was likely Lin Dong's group, which had a reputation that was catching up to the 10 great super empires. Mu Hongling quietly clenched her hand tightly. The tense atmosphere caused her experience breathing difficulties. She could also sense the anxiety of those around her. All of them were awaiting Lin Dong's answer. This was because the person in front of them was considered as their final savior. Mu Hongling's pretty eyes were staring at the quiet Lin Dong with a complicated expression. All sorts of emotions were mixed into it. Who could imagine that the young man, who had once ended up in an exceptionally miserable state in her hands, would actually become this powerful within a short half a year? Even their final fate rests on his single word. This tense atmosphere continued for a while before it was broken by a long exhale from Lin Dong. He raised his eyes and looked at the incomparably anxious Liu Bai's group before softly saying, "Can you deal with the Blood Seal Empire and the Bone Jade Empire? As long as the Sky Devil Empire does not intervene, we can definitely settle these 2 empires." An excitement flashed across the eyes of Liu Bai and Yang Sen as they replied in a deep voice. In that case. Lin Dong lifted his lips. Immediately, the corner of his mouth was lifted into a relatively fiery hot arc. In that case, just leave the Sky Devil Empire to us. The back of Mu Hongling's teeth bit her red lips. Her pretty eyes stared at the young face, where a wild heat had appeared. An unusual flush gradually surged up onto the enchanting face of hers. The attraction she felt towards Lin Dong at this moment had surpassed any of the outstanding men whom she had met in the past. She was not aware of how this situation would end. However, she knew that in this subsequent big battle, this man would become the most dazzling existence within the 100 Empire Forest. Brother Lin Dong has agreed. Liu Bai and Yang Sen's faces were simultaneously filled with joy and excitement. Originally, they thought that it was going to be very difficult to convince Lin Dong to cooperate with them. After all, the ones that they had to deal with were one of the 10 great super empires, Sky Devil Empire. However, once they saw Lin Dong nod his head, both of them involuntarily heaved a sigh of relief. Lin Dong chuckled. No one in their right mind would want to fight with the perverted 10 great super empires, and he felt likewise. However, just as Liu Bai had mentioned, right now, they had no other alternatives. Since Sky Devil Empire and the other empires have laid a trap, it was evident that they were not intending to let them off easily. Therefore, unless they chose to withdraw from the 100 Empire War now, else, they had no choice but to fight with the Sky Devil Empire. Furthermore, it was naturally impossible for Lin Dong to withdraw from the 100 Empire War. Since he refused to give up, he had no choice but to fight. Even though the Sky Devil Empire is extremely powerful, no one knows who will emerge victorious if they fought seriously. After all, right now, Lin Dong's group was quite powerful as well. Even though 3-5 Yuan Nirvana stage practitioners is quite troublesome, I believe that we can handle it. Little Martin casually said. When they heard his words, Liu Bai and the rest involuntarily turned to look at him. Little Martin's beautiful young face caused them to feel somewhat startled, but no one dared to underestimate him. During this period of time, they had heard much news regarding Lin Dong's group. Naturally, it also contained news regarding Little Martin. Therefore, they knew that this gorgeous-looking fellow was actually deep and unpredictable. "Be careful," Lin Dong softly said. On top of the 100 Empire War, there were members from the super sect monitoring this forest. If Little Martin was to blow his cover, it might cause quite a bit of trouble. "Don't worry, there is no need for me to use my real body to handle a 5-yuan Nirvana stage practitioner. As long as the two of you don't screw up, we will be fine," Little Martin casually said. There was a tinge of unconcealable pride contained within his tone. As a celestial demon Martin, arrogance was embedded deep into his bones and it could not be erased. "Brother Liu Bai, lead the way." When he saw this scene, Lin Dong chose not to speak any further. Instead, he tiled his head and smiled at Liu Bai before he spoke. "Yes." Liu Bai quickly nodded his head. Without further ado, he directly turned around and led the way. Behind him, Yang Sen and the rest quickly followed behind. Finally, Lin Dong's group leisurely tailed behind them. When these three factions gathered together, their combined aura was pretty impressive. Furthermore, Liu Bai, Yang Sen and Lin Dong were not unknown individuals. Therefore, when they traveled across the 100 Empire Forest together, they attracted quite a bit of attention. Why is Lin Dong together with Liu Bai and the rest? All of them are the heirs that gained the inheritance of the four great mysterious sects. According to what I know, the inheritor of the Daotai sect has already laid a trap for them at the base of the 100 Empire Mountain. That faction is one of the 10 great super empires, Sky Devil Empire. With such a powerful foe in their way, how could Lin Dong dare to travel alone? Seems like they are in for a rough time. The three devils of the Sky Devil Empire are no pushovers, and they are genuine 5-yuan Nirvana stage practitioners. That may not be the case. Even though the Sky Devil Empire is powerful, Lin Dong's group is no pushovers as well. Yesterday, when the Great Net Empire went to harass them, eventually just Lin Dong and that fellow called Lin Dio attacked and totally crushed them. Their strength should not lose out to the Sky Devil Empire. Hence, if they truly fought, the outcome is still up in the air. Go. Let's follow them and see. If you miss out on such a grand battle, it would be a huge waste. The originally heated atmosphere in the forest began to turn boiling hot as Lin Dong's large group flashed by. After all, in this period of time, Lin Dong's reputation has directly caught up with the 10 great super empires, and everyone know that he was going to be the Black Horse in this 100 Empire War. Therefore, when this Black Horse was about to fight with an established empire like the Sky Devil Empire, everyone became excited. With regards to the escalating atmosphere in the forest, Lin Dong's group chose to ignore it. They turned their attention towards the deepest region of the forest, while a fiery battle intent faintly emerged on their bodies. They knew that the following battle would surely shock their entire 100 Empire Forest. Even though the 100 Empire Forest was vast, for most of the elite practitioners here, it would only take an hour for them to traverse across it. However, in order to obtain enough Nirvana seals to allow them to ascend to Nirvana Golden ranking, they had to undergo countless brutal battles. Of course, even so, though there was quite a few individuals who were currently at the deepest region of the 100 Empire Forest, all of them had something in common. That was, all of them were quite powerful. At the southern side of the 100 Empire Mountain was a large area filled with odd rocks. The terrain was fairly peculiar, and some of the rocks were as even several hundred meters tall, just like a tiny mountain. This was one of the few paths that everyone must pass through in order to reach the 100 Empire Mountain. For practitioners traveling from the south, all of them must pass through this area, before they can ascend on the 100 Empire Mountain behind it. Right now, there were several figures standing on top of those large rocks. Faintly, there was an icy cold and venomous aura circulating in the air. At the central spot in this terrain filled with odd rocks, there was a dozen over figures that were quietly seated down. They did not intentionally activate their yuan power. However, there were still circular winds formed from yuan power howling beside their bodies, giving off a deep buzzing sound. Furthermore, for the three figures seated right in front, this vibration was the most intense. All three of them were wearing a black long robes, and there was a picture of a skull on their robes. Wherever their robes swayed in the wind, it seemed like that skeleton was about to break free of their clothes and directly swallow a human. There was a tinge of similarity between their looks. Meanwhile, an alarming yuan power pressure unknowing emerged from within their bodies and enveloped the entire area with odd rocks, causing several people's expressions to change. Swoosh! A beautiful figure dressed in blue broke through the air before she landed on top of a large rock in this area. Her slim and alluring figure belonged to Lanying, whom Lin Dong was briefly acquainted with. They actually laid such a formidable setup. As Lanying stared at the three seated figures, her beautiful pupils dilated. Ha ha, seems like the Sky Devil Empire plans to make a clean sweep of Lin Dong's group in this spot. Suddenly, a hearty laughter emerged from behind Lanying. Following which, she saw a figure gently floating down behind her. It was a handsome man dressed in moon-white clothes with a long sword on his back. As his toes touched the ground, faintly, an extremely powerful sword aura spread out, causing tiny cracks to appear on the surrounding large rocks. You are late by one step. Lanying smiled as she said. I met that fellow from Sword Empire at the northern side and I fought with him. That's why I am a little late. That man carrying a long sword smiled as he replied. Oh, that fellow who loves the blade as much as he loves his life. How powerful is he now? Lanying gently raised her brows and asked. He has also advanced to 5 yuan nirvana stage. The sword ancestor techniques of the Sword Empire are quite extraordinary, and they do not lose out to the celestial sword techniques of our celestial empire. The three Song brothers have laid out a pretty terrifying formation. Do you think Lin Dong will have the guts to challenge him? That man suddenly turned to look at that man filled with odd rocks. When he saw this formation, he asked mockingly. The Song family 3 devils are all 5 yuan nirvana stage practitioners, and they are considered as the elite fighting force in the 100 Empire War. Right now, all 3 of them have a purple gold nirvana seal, and have stepped into the nirvana golden ranking. This man, called Qing Feng, was a little surprised that they would actually use such a formation to deal with Lin Dong's group. I am afraid you are wrong this time around. I have met Lin Dong, and he is a pretty interesting fellow. Furthermore, they are quite powerful as well. Even if the Sky Devil Empire was to attack them, the final outcome is up in the air. Lanying gently smiled as he said. Gulp. When he heard his words, Qing Feng gently lifted his brows before he asked disbelievingly. I don't believe that they will appear. You should be well aware of the strength of the Song brothers. Lanying smiled before she gently gripped her jade-like hands. Following which, her beautiful eyes turned toward the path that every practitioner must cross to reach the 100 Empire Mountain, before she softly said, Don't look down on them, or there will be a hefty price to pay. For a bunch of low-rank Empire members to make it here, it requires perseverance, talent and wits. Qing Feng, if you did not have the backing of the Celestial Empire, do you think that you could make it here and possess a reputation that could surpass the 10 great super empires? Qing Feng was startled. Finally, he gently reduced the mocking grin on his face. After he was silent for a moment, he slowly said, Could it be? Lanying gently smiled. Her sharp chin was extremely alluring. As she lifted her head, she gently smiled. So, they have arrived. Ching Feng suddenly lifted his head, only to hear breaking wind sounds suddenly emerging from that distant forest. Following which, several figures filled with rich battle intent dashed forth, just like sharp blades. Did they really come? In the instant, in that area filled with odd rocks, 3 black-robed figures, who had tightly shut their eyes, suddenly opened their eyes. Rich yuan power immediately swept froth, just like a hurricane. Boundless yuan power engulfed the area like a wild storm. Gusts swept up across the stone-littered ground, causing sand and pebbles to fill the air, making one feel as if one was in a storm. Numerous gazes turned to the direction of the whooshing sound in a flash of understanding. These gazes were filled with surprise and expectation. Amidst the rubble, the eyes of the 3 men, who were wearing robes that had skull prints on them, began to flicker. Then, they stood up expressionlessly, and due to their powerful auras, the yuan power in the surroundings started to show signs of undulation. He, how daring of you! There are not many people in the ancient battlefield who dare to rush into a trap set up by the Sky Devil Empire. An uncanny laugh came from behind the 3 black-robed men. Soon after, 2 more figures appeared. One of them was dressed in a blood-red robe, and his body was reeking of blood. The other person was dressed in a pale white robe, which seemed extremely ghastly, giving off a sinister feeling. Shui Ying, who are you, let my Sky Devil Empire deal with Lin Dong and his party. I will leave Liu Bai and his counterparts to your Blood Seal Empire and Bone Jade Empire. I hope both of you won't be as useless as the Great Net Empire. One of the skull-printed, black-robed men said indifferently. He had a pair of hollow eyes and a distinct aquiline nose, exuding a rather menacing aura. He was the second brother of the Song Devils, Song Q. Don't worry, brother Song Q. Liu Bai and his counterparts will not escape, the blood-red-robed man and the pale white-robed man replied hastily to Song Q's indifferent words. They clearly knew how ruthless the killing methods of the 3 men before them were. The capabilities of the Song Devils sufficed to make the 2 men fear them. Lin Dong and his counterparts must be quite capable to be able to defeat the Great Net Empire. Much to my surprise, they approached us with no hesitation even though they knew of the trap I have set. The man standing at most front of the 3 black-robed men smirked. He was the most gentle-looking out of the 3 men. However, those who were familiar with the Song Devils knew that he was Songjin, the most terrifying one out of the 3 men. Not only was his strength terrifying, but his killing methods were extremely terrifying as well. Reportedly, none of those who had their Nirvana seals seized by him survived. As such, whoever encountered this fiend did not even have the courage to put up any resistance and surrendered his or her Nirvana seal automatically in hope of surviving. This is quite a good burial ground. Song Ba, who was ranked 3rd among the 3 men, curled his mouth and sneered. His pale white teeth contained an aura that would make one's heart palpitate. Behind the 3 men, the Shui Ying duo broke out into a sinister laughter, and then raised their heads to look in the direction of the wind whipping sound. Swish swish. The sound of wind whipping became increasingly intense. After a moment, all the gazes were converged at the piece of land that was full of rubble. A figure emerged from the forest and landed slowly outside of the rubble land. Atop the huge boulder, Lan Ying and Ching Feng raised their heads and stared at the figure who had just appeared. This figure was somewhat familiar. It was Lin Dong. Swoosh swoosh. As Lin Dong and his counterparts landed outside of the rubble land, numerous sounds of wind whipping broke out behind them. Numerous figures came in from all directions and landed outside of the rubble land, causing the border of the land to be congested. Those 3 men are the Song Devils of the Sky Devil Empire. The ones behind them are the leaders of the Blood Seal Empire and Bone Jade Empire. The 2 of them are of the same level as the Great Net Empire's Xiao Shan. Liu Bai commented in a soft voice, as he stood beside Lin Dong and stared solemnly at the three figures wearing skull-printed black robes. Lin Dong raised his head and stared at the three figures, whose bodies were surging with violent yuan power. A grave look flashed across his eyes. He could sense the formidable strength of the three men. On the border of the land, there were countless practitioners from the three great empires eyeing this scene covetously. However, most of their faces contained a mocking look. Clearly, they regarded Lin Dong and his counterparts as a bunch of trapped fishes. More and more people gathered around the rubble land after Lin Dong and his counterparts arrived. However, there were not much disorder or chaos. Under the powerful auras exuded by the bodies of the Song Devils, these participants that used to show signs of insanity due to the atmosphere of the 100 Empire Forest seemed to have awakened. They knew that this battleground did not belong to them. Lin Dong's gaze landed upon the three black figures, who were standing upright on the distant huge boulder. The gazes of the Songjin trio landed upon Lin Dong and his counterparts as well. A weird smile slowly rose upon their faces. Clap clap. Under the attentive gazes of the onlookers, Songjin clapped his hands lightly and smiled. You must be Lin Dong. Regardless, your courage impresses me. If not for our inheritances, I might have made friends with you. I'm afraid I'm not worthy of that, Lin Dong smiled plainly. Apparently, he had sensed the mocking tone in Songjin's words. That's true, those who are about to die are indeed not worthy. Lin Dong, don't assume that you are qualified to act flamboyant in front of my Sky Devil Empire, just because you have some fame. To put it bluntly, you are not even qualified at all, Song Qiu replied indifferently. Hee, your tone is even much more arrogant than mine, little Martin smirked as a smile rose upon his handsome face. Song Qiu's eyes froze. Suddenly, he shot a piercing cold stare at little Martin and pointed his index finger outwards. Immediately, a spiraling gale whizzed out of his finger like a lightning and surged towards little Martin with a terrifying speed. However, little Martin did not show any signs of dodging upon seeing Song Qiu's incoming attack. Before the powerful spiraling gale reached within 10 feet of little Martin, it automatically disappeared. This scene sent a shiver down many people's spines. It's a disgrace to play such a trick in front of Grandpa Martin. If you really want to court death, get down now. Grandpa Martin has never heard of your bullshit Sky Devil Empire. Little Martin sneered as he stared at Song Qiu with chilliness surging through his eyes. You're courting death. Song Qiu went into a rage of a sudden. Boundless yuan power and killer intent pervaded the air abruptly, making the surrounding onlookers to tremble in fear. Both parties were harsh towards each other. In their conversations, there were no signs of giving way to each other. Clearly, both parties were prepared to fight each other. Hee, you are the first person that dares to scold my Sky Devil Empire in such a way, Songjin chuckled. However, everyone could sense the anger that was concealed behind his chuckle. Each time we encounter a super empire with a superiority complex, they always have to spurt out a bunch of nonsense first. Lin Dong could not help but heave a sigh. Following which, under numerous attentive gazes, he reached out his finger and pointed it at Songjin. Then, he spoke with a calm tone, let's start fighting. Otherwise, surrender your Nirvana seal and get lost. Whoa! The area went into an uproar. Even Lei Ning and Qing Feng, who were standing on that huge boulder, were stunned by this scene. After a moment, Qing Feng turned to Lei Ning and gave a thumb up and said, this lad is really something. He dares to say such things to Songjin. I don't know whether he is trying to be brave or what. How can a person like him, who came from a low-rank empire, make it here just by being hot-headed and putting on a brave front? Lan Ying smiled gently. I hope you're right. Otherwise, this would be boring, Ching Feng shrugged his shoulder and replied. Ha ha, interesting. Song Jin gave a smile and stared at Lin Dong. Traces of ghastliness were rising deep within his eyes. Violent Yuan power was surging through his body like a volcanic eruption. Everyone could tell that the leader of the Sky Devil Empire was extremely enraged. It has been quite a while since I have such a desire to kill someone. None of you shall escape from here today. Song Jin's face continued to carry a smile. However, the words that came out of his mouth made the surrounding practitioners tremble in fear. Some people even retreated from the area silently. Brother Liu Bai, I shall leave Blood Seal Empire and Bone Jade Empire to you and your counterparts. Lin Dong turned his head and looked at Liu Bai and instructed softly. My two brothers and I will handle the Song Devils. Liu Bai stared blankly at Lin Dong. From the latter's voice, Liu Bai could not sense any fear. Instead, his voice was filled with an unconcealable battle fury. No matter who they were facing, these fellow always seemed to display no fear at all. Brother Lin Dong, don't worry. No matter how fierce the fight is, we will not let them interfere with your battle. Liu Bai assured in a low voice after taking in a deep breath. Lin Dong smiled and nodded his head. The Lin Dong trio then looked at each other in the eyes and nodded their heads slightly. Under the watchful eyes of the onlookers, they took a step forward. Bang bang. As the three of them stepped forward, the rubble on the ground exploded. Astonishing power swept out from their bodies. Song Jin licked his lips with his scarlet tongue. His eyes were filled with intense killer intent. Soon after, he took a step forward as well. Behind him, Song Q and Song Ba followed suit. Immediately, numerous huge cracks extended throughout the huge boulder that was beneath their feet. Kill. A low and cold voice came out of Lin Dong and Song Jin's mouths almost at the same time. At this moment, 6 ghost-like figures surged forward in an instant. At this point of time, killing intent rushed into the sky and caused a storm from every direction. Wild wind surged, carrying 6 ghost-like figures that rushed over the chaotic rock ground. When they crossed each other, it appeared as though this entire area turned silent for an instant. After which, everyone could see a terrifying storm suddenly sweeping over. The large rocks around instantly exploded into dust. Wild wind was accompanied by the rock fragments that shot out and directly slammed into the ground around the place, until a large number of holes were formed. The permeating sandy wind surged and Lin Dong's sharp eyes were directly locked on the eldest of the 3 Song Devils, Song Jin. Although the 3 Song Devils were experts, who had stepped into the 5 Yuan Nirvana stage, Song Jin looked particularly difficult to deal with. If one was to really discuss about fighting strength, the strongest was naturally little Martin with unfathomable strength. However, the precondition of doing so was that he must reveal the physical body of the celestial demon Martin, and the current situation clearly did not allow this. Hence, since Lin Dong was afraid that little Martin might end up blowing his cover, he did not assign Song Jin to the latter. Instead, he personally stepped forward to fight Song Jin alone. You actually dare to challenge me with just the strength of a 3 Yuan Nirvana stage. I really wonder where your courage comes from. Song Jin looked towards that figure which had rushed over. He smiled slightly, but his eyes contained trace of dark chillness climbing into them. Bright gold light agglomerated on his right leg. In the blink of an eye, his right leg appeared as though it was made of gold. Bam! Song Jin's gold-colored right leg handed heavily onto the ground, causing the land to tremble a little. An enormous gap quickly spread out from under his foot in a lightning-like manner. It became just like a ground dragon that tore the land and rushed towards Lin Dong. Lin Dong's eyes scintillated as he watched the cracked ground. He could sense that there was an incomparably wild and violent energy hidden within it. It turns out that Songjin's true strength was extremely powerful. Being at 5 yuan nirvana stage was sufficient for him to look down on everyone else. Even Lin Dong did not dare to underestimate such an opponent. He immediately beckoned with his hand before a black-colored metal seal appeared in his hand. Immediately, a monstrous black glow that soared with the wind came slamming down heavily. Boom! The instant the metal seal violently smashed onto the ground, the trembling ground became quiet immediately. Even that rising ground dragon was forcefully suppressed by that metal seal. Heavenly soul treasure. Even though you possess a heavenly soul treasure, how can you fight with me with just your mere 3 yuan nirvana stage strength? A glint flashed across Songjin's eyes. He had identified the soul treasure in Lin Dong's hands with just a glance. However, he was not surprised. Instead, he laughed once again as he stepped forward. Bang bang bang. The ground around the black metal seal suddenly exploded. 4 ground dragon whizzed out while being accompanied by some rock fragments. They violently attacked Lin Dong, who was standing on the metal seal. The speed of the 4 ground dragons was just like a thunderbolt. Even quite a number of experts that had stepped into the 4 yuan nirvana stage could only see a rock fragment stream flash past their eyes. After which, they saw the 4 ground dragons had already sealed off Lin Dong's retreat path. The ground dragon contained some fierce violent strength, as it came smashing down furiously. However, just as they were about to hit Lin Dong, a green glow suddenly spread across his body, before they transformed into 4 glowing green scale shield. Bang bang. The ground dragons that contained a mighty yuan power smashed furiously onto the green scale shield without showing any mercy. As the shockwave scattered forth, it caused the skin on the heads of quite a number of people to turn numb. Just this attack from Songjin would likely be sufficient to seriously injure some 4 yuan nirvana stage experts. They really did not know how Lin Dong, who only had the strength of a 3 yuan nirvana stage expert, was going to block it. Rock fragments that permeated the sky shot out explosively. After which, everyone saw that Lin Dong's body had also swiftly shot backwards. The green scale armor that had just been formed also quickly paled. Clearly, it was forcefully scattered by the ground dragon. From the looks of this, it seemed like Lin Dong would have difficulty obtaining the upper hand in his fight with Songjin. Do you only have this little ability? It looks like you were only able to defeat Luo Tong by chance. Songjin smiled faintly. There was a ridicule in his smile. Moreover, his attack did not stop while he spoke. Majestic yuan power whistled out. Wild and violent attacks covered Lin Dong like a storm, not giving him even the chance to catch his breath. Strangely though, Lin Dong continued to dodge Songjin's attacks. In fact, it looked as though he was a little afraid of fighting directly with Songjin. Some soft exclamations was also erupted from the surroundings upon seeing this scene. Clearly, they did not expect that Lin Dong would show signs of being at a disadvantage after having just started fighting. It appeared that the gap of 2 levels was not something that was so easy to make up for. Huh! Lanying, who was observing the battle within the battleground, suddenly emitted a soft huh. She softly uttered, "Why did Lin Dong's attacks become a little weaker?" No matter how one puts it, Songjin is a 5 yuan nirvana stage expert, while Lin Dong is only at 3 yuan nirvana stage. Although the latter is quite strong, it is naturally impossible to challenge someone 2 levels higher. It is not surprising that he would end up being pushed into having a disadvantageous position. Feng Qing laughed faintly. Lanying knitted her eyebrows slightly. Her pretty eyes stared at Lin Dong, who was dodging and pulling back. She vaguely sensed that something was off. It was possible for her to see that Lin Dong's face did not reveal the slightest anxiety and panic in face of Songjin's intense attacks. In fact, his pair of eyes had a faint glint flickering within it. What is this fellow planning? A glint flashed across Lin Ying's eyes, as though a thought had appeared within her mind. Lin Dong is. The expression of Liu Bai's group also changed when they saw this scene. They were a little unable to comprehend why Lin Dong would suddenly choose to dodge and avoid fighting. Could it be that he was really no match for Song Jun? There were also some doubt in the eyes of Su Kuei and Su Ru by the side. They had been together with Lin Dong for such a long time, and were aware of some of the latter's techniques. Song Jun was indeed powerful, but it would not reach the point of being able to force Lin Dong, who had an endless number of trump cards, to such an extent. Ha ha, is this the legendary dark horse, who is rumored to be able to challenge the 10 great super empires? Song Q also laughed coldly when he saw this scene. You really speak too much nonsense. Don't you think that it is a little early to be celebrating now? Little Martin's ghost-like figure directly appeared in front of Song Q. His handsome face currently had a chillness surging within it. Purple-black energy swiftly surged on both of his hands. Its great corrosive strength caused the surrounding air to sizzle. You dare to deliver yourself, you must be courting death. Today, none of you should even plan to leave alive. A ferocious smile involuntarily flashed across Song Q's face when he saw this situation. He clenched his large hand and a bright gold light surged out. This gold light directly agglomerated into a gold-colored large blade in his hand. Within the Nirvana stage, those Nirvana golden body that had underwent tempering from 5 Nirvana tribulations would become quite powerful. In fact, some of the Nirvana golden body strength will spill over, and they can agglomerate it into various items. The offensive or defensive strength of these things would be extremely powerful. Clearly, Song Q had already reached this stage. Creak! The gold-colored large blade came hacking down furiously. Before it was completely unleashed, a splitting sound was emitted from the ground. A large deep gully that was nearly 100 feet large was formed. Humph! However, a cold smile flashed across little Martin's eyes in the face of this kind of powerful attack. Purple-black glow gathered on his palm. It vaguely transformed into the shape of a claw. After which, it was extended out and directly grabbed that gold-colored large blade that came hacking down furiously. A cruel smile immediately surfaced on Song Q's face when he saw that little Martin actually dared to arrogantly block his blade attack. However, his smile had just appeared when it froze solid due to a slight crack sound. This was because he saw that his gold-colored large blade, which was now grabbed by little Martin's hand, had actually collapsed between his 5 fingers. You useless being actually dare to act so arrogantly in front of me. Little Martin's eyes became dark and cold. He shattered the golden large blade with his hand. After which, he extended his right palm with lightning-like speed and directly penetrated through Song Q's defense. After which, it ruthlessly imprinted onto the latter's chest. Wild and violent strength spluttered out and sent Song Q flying with a palm. Clamor. This scene once again invited numerous exclamations. Those people, who had been greatly disappointed by Lin Dong's performance, finally braced their attention. From the looks of it, Lin Dong's group was not as weak as they imagined. So you are actually the strongest within that group. It seems like Lin Dong is just acting tough. Song Q's eyes sunk as he looked at this scene and said. Song Q's expression changed slightly after his voice sounded. A black rod shadow had directly penetrated through the air in his eyes, and was shooting over explosively. It was possible to vaguely see a black tiger roaring towards the sky over the rod. Song Ba let out a cold snort. He did not even need to look in order to tell that the one who had attacked was definitely Little Flame from Lin Dong's group. Gold light immediately surged. After which, it directly transformed into a gold-colored large shield in front of Song Ba. Clang! The black-colored metal rod violently landed onto the gold-colored large shield. A shocking sound scattered. Those two enormous rocks by the side were immediately blasted apart, transforming into rock dust that scattered throughout the sky. Don't worry, the last one lying on the ground will definitely not be my big brother. Little Flame's muscular giant-like figure appeared in front of Song Ba. His low and deep voice was just like muffled thunder. Meanwhile, the metal rod in his hand actually transformed into numerous rod after images that swept towards Song Ba from all directions. Nonsense! Song Ba laughed ferociously. Immediately, a fierce glint erupted from his eyes. Majestic Yuan power surged and directly collided hard with Little Flame. Bang bang! The intense battle that had suddenly erupted within the arena caused Liu Bai's and Yang Sen's expressions to gradually become grave. Lin Dong was currently still at a disadvantage. His manner seemed as though he did not have the ability to fight back against Song Zhen. In fact, his shaky manner hinted that he would not be able to last for long. What exactly is this fellow doing? Liu Bai clenched his fist slightly. He was really unable to believe that a person who could completely defeat Xiao Shan would actually end up with such disadvantage in Song Zhen's hands. While everyone were feeling doubtful because of this, Lin Dong's figure continued to dodge. Only occasionally did he use the black metal seal in his hand to block Song Zhen's attack. However, his body would swiftly pull back each time such a collision occurred, appearing as though he was unable to bear that attack. However, no one realized that with the flow of time, traces of bright redness were vaguely appearing on Lin Dong's skin. There seemed to be something that was firmly suppressed deep with his eyes. That kind of feeling was as though he was a volcano which was about to erupt. This video will end here.